The Mind Assigns Meaning by MultiGen Mindset Institute. I wanted to talk about the assigning of meaning to events and stimulus that come to us on a day-to-day basis, and what that does to our human experience, and also how much control we have over the human experience in respect to the meaning that we can assign to any given circumstance as we move through it, and as we deal with it, and as we work towards things. There's one constant known truth, and that's that humans want to be better. We all want to be better. We want to earn more money. We want to have more love. We want to have more travel, experiences, impact. We want our businesses to grow, our families to grow, our children. We all want to grow. And you're always working to grow. And so we want to make that process easier for the listeners and the students of MultiGen Mindset Institute. And as a situation occurs, the moment that it's happening, we're feeling things, we're noticing things, we're taking in the information of what's happening, right? So, for example, if you're working to get a deal done in your company and you're in mid-process of that deal, and then boom, something comes up that stalls the deal, that maybe the client isn't okay with your payment preferences or payment options. Maybe the client is stalling at the last second and wanting to divert and get other quotes, or you get a snag. And this can be applied to anything in life, that's occurring in the moment of time. You look up and you see lights on behind you, right? And these are reactive circumstances that I keep explaining. These are circumstances where you're moving through your day, and then boom, something happens, and boom, there's an initial response. So that's what I'm talking about on a behavioral response level, right? And also there's times when we're going after things. We're trying to gain more muscle in the gym, or lose weight, or both. We're trying to move our life forward externally in some kind of a way, working to buy a house, sell a house. I mean, you can name a million circumstances that any one of us could be in where we need something to occur. We need something to happen. We shouldn't say need, but you prefer is the correct word, something to go a certain way that you're working on. This is a known goal, right? All of us have one of that as well. So this applying meaning, it applies to both. When something happens that you didn't expect to happen, and it kind of slams you, right? And you got to deal with it, right? That's the moment in time where a lot of us can spiral down, right? Because in any given stimulus, you can respond positively or negatively. And in the tone spectrum that we read about in Dr. Hawkins' work, Dr. Hawkins has power versus force. He has letting go. And also, if you study Scientology, it as well speaks about the tone scale and emotional tones, and the average tone that somebody can be in, and also what kind of emotional tone somebody might respond to when they get bad news, right? So, and that's what we're talking about here, is the mind assigning meaning. And this is where bondage or freedom comes into play. This is where faith or fear come into play, right? And there's a stimulus response mechanism that's always happening inside the mind and inside the body. And the body's reacting with sweaty palms, hair standing up on the back of the neck, tense, stomach sickness, right? So the body's going to respond to stress. Well, what if the way that stress occurs is the way that interpretation occurs, right? If stress is a response mechanism, if pressure and stress is response, well, who's responsible for the stimulus that's coming into that analytical system that's determining that there's stress? This is where suffering comes in. When in the midst of something, this is where suffering comes. You continue to suffer because of the way that you're processing the event that you're experiencing. From a traffic ticket to a breakup. And I'm talking about negative things, right? Because that's where we struggle the most. On the flip side, there's also the way that you handle things that are good that come into your world. So you're looking for an office and you're praying for an office, and all of a sudden your friend is casually talking to you and says, "Oh, I'm going to look at an office in this building over here." And you weren't aware of this building. And your friend, she's like, "Hey, buddy, well, why don't you come with me? I think there's an office there that you'll love." And you're like, "No way, I've been looking for an office for months," right? And it's just like this natural unfolding of the thing happening better than you can imagine it. So a spiral up or spiral down could happen from a good event coming in. If you don't enter into gratitude and gratefulness and you apply the universal laws to something good that happens. So you can spiral up or spiral down. So whether and a stimulus from your environment into your awareness is negative or it's positive, if you don't respond correctly and train yourself over time to be in a certain modality of function through your day-to-day life of gratefulness and appreciation and humbleness and a dedication and devotion to trusting in what's good regardless of, and constantly in the momentous phase of converting negative to positive, and refusing to accept any news as negative, right? So news comes in, you have a rule. You don't accept negative news as negative. It's always converted. What is the good in this, right? And that's how we stop suffering, is because we stop experiencing things in that way. That's why I talk about, bad things unfolding, is because that's where we need to apply this the most, where we're hurting, where things are bothering us, right? We have to apply, well, where's the guidance, right? Where's the guidance in the buffer and the barrier in the problem that you are experiencing? Because you got to look for the barrier and why the barrier is there. What do you need to change about yourself or your operations or your system in order for this to no longer happen? Because when you get into an emergency state or some kind of condition, you have to say, okay, what occurred, what happened, and why, and how do we change systems so this doesn't happen again, right? And so the assigning of meaning has to do with the emotional response and what that thing means to you. Okay, so it's really hard to talk about without using live examples, but when I would say that when you wake up in the morning and you're moving through your day and you go to get dressed and you're getting in the shower and you're brushing your teeth and you're having your coffee and you're just going through your day and you're doing your affirmations and you're saying, your spouse, your family, your children, whatever goes on in the morning in your household, and then you start checking your phone and you start dealing with what life is bringing to you that day. All of us go through this. We wake up in the morning and we face the day, right? What is going to come at us this day that's good and negative, right? So every day comes with news. That's one thing that you can count on. And so tuning yourself and training yourself and your mind and your responses and your gratitude levels and your emotional channel that you're most often in, that's where the training of the person happens. So it's like in the two works that I've read the most that talk about this the most precisely as a science is Dr. David Hawkins' books, Power versus Force and Letting Go. Those two books. And in Scientology, the science of what they teach in the tone scale and the emotional tone scale, they're almost identical pieces of work. And they're both beautiful and will change your mind and change your life when you think about how you experience being human. And the reason why we struggle is because there's two of us inside of us. There's our divine nature, our divine being, our soul identity, who we are, right? And then there's the body that we're in. And the body that we're in has feelings and emotions that are felt within the body, sadness, anger, pain. They can measure that it's felt in the brain, right? And the brain is where you feel these things. That's where things are processed. But you're not your brain and you're not your body. And so when you are feeling emotions and you're I-aming these emotions, I-aming angry, I-aming upset, I-aming sad, I-aming afraid. When you're I-aming these emotions, you're identifying with them as yourself rather than things that you as a spiritual being are noticing, seeing, feeling, and processing. So if you imagine yourself 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet above your head, looking down on yourself, like wherever you sit right now, in your car, in your desk, in your chair, on your couch, if you're walking, reading, whatever you're doing right now, if you just close your eyes and imagine picturing down on the top of your head, if you can get out of your body and look down on yourself and where you are, the environment that you're in, and see yourself from the outside, like you are a spiritual being that you are using, and I don't even want to say inside of this, but avataring this human body. You are avataring this human body, and this human body, it needs to eat, it needs to sleep, it has feelings, it has thoughts, emotion, right? So you have to get yourself this mechanism that you're in. This body is extremely advanced. It comes with a brain, and it wants to survive. And it has mechanisms and tools that it's had since the caveman days, if not civilization before this. For 500, a million years, they've got history of humans, versions of humans, giants, and everything being on Earth. So you are in a multi-million or million-old flesh suit that has mechanisms to survive. And when you were operating through that as an I am this million-year-old body with a brain, when you're I-aming that, you're identifying with it, and it breaks you from being able to get above and get out of circumstances. So when you see yourself above yourself and you look down on the back of your head and you see yourself sitting wherever you are, and you can stay in that space, it can detach you from living within this life, within the circumstances, within where you are, right? Because you know, God is there in your circumstance. But when you're in your mess, God, it's not that he can't get to you, it's that you're sovereign. And he can't step on your sovereign toes by intervening into a situation that you're sovereign over, which is you, your body, your circumstance, and where you are in your circle of influence of the life that you're living. And we want things differently. We want to change things. We want to get bigger, and we want to grow. And we run into barriers, and we run into good news and bad news on a daily basis. And I want you to be able to use the tone scale. So what I want to teach you about the tone scale is that there's an average tone that you are in most often, and that tone determines your most of your responses most of the time. And right, so that is the tone that you most often experience life in. So because each category and area of our life, the health, wealth, happiness, and love, are handled and managed on different responsibility levels, that means that a person has a different tone in each area of life. So that's why you can have somebody that has a wonderful, successful marriage. They are super successful in life. That's health, that's wealth and love. But then they're slightly or pretty much unhappy because their health and their health and wellness areas haven't been managed, and they're not going to the gym, they're not working out, they're not in communication with their body, they're overweight, their cholesterol is high, so their sexual performance is suffering, they're having lethargy, right? Their bowel systems and their intestines is full of bacteria, and their whole body is sick, but yet so their happiness level is faltered because of that. And remember, we teach a MultiGen mindset that you have 4 areas of life: health, wealth, happiness, and love. And the happiness one is solely dependent on how well you're managing and in what responsibility level you're managing the other 3 categories in. And so when we get so we can have a high tone in one area and a low tone in another. We can also, on the flip side, be somebody who spends 3 hours in the gym every day, and they have a 6-pack, and they eat extremely healthy, and they handle their businesses really well, and they're successful, but yet their relationships suffer because there's toxic or unhealed trauma in the love department. So their family relationships and their friendships are suffering, and he's missing out, and he's isolating, and he's spending most of his time at the gym and the rest of it, working, and then he's isolated, and he's suffering, right? So That means he's got a low tone on the love section, which means his happiness would also be deeply affected, even though he's being successful at work in the gym. This kind of person would drive themselves and drive themselves and drive themselves into these other two categories where they have a high tone and they have a high response level and they have a high responsibility level in, and they have a lot of energy and charge in, because that would be an easy way to avoid confronting the areas of life where they're unhappy because in their love life and their friends and their relationships are suffering, because confronting that area would be a huge responsibility, and they don't want to take responsibility for that area, so they avoid it by putting all of their time and energy into these other categories and overcompensating. But yet then they're driven into madness because they're never finding happiness because they're not confronting the real problem. They're overcompensating with energy and time. And that's where a man who's married will hear from his wife, you're spending all your time at work and you're avoiding your kids and your wife, right? And then his excuse is, I'm working, I'm doing this for us. I'm doing this for our family, don't you understand? Right? That's what his response is, but he's really avoiding confronting something in that area of his life, so he remains unhappy, right? So whenever, getting back to responding to stimulus and events in our lives, both good news and bad news, and that there being an average tone that you're in, your average tone is kind of it's a merging of all those four life categories. You combine those and merge those up, and then you get your average tone, right? Depending on how out of whack each one of those categories is, you can get an average tone. And so the tone level goes like this. At the very top of it, you have, the happiness, and then above that, there's glee. I have the charts here in the office somewhere, but it goes up from there to these higher and higher levels of, in Dr. Hawkins' work, it's on the tone scale of up to like 1,000. And 1,000 is enlightenment. 1,000 is full enlightenment. It's merging with the one, right? It's identifying with the one, right? And then beneath that, you get individualized. The lower and lower and lower you go on the tone scale, you get more individualized and more individualized, all the way down to the bottom of the tone scale, where there's depression, isolation, you get into apathy, and you get at the very bottom of that is self-destruction and complete isolation. That's where you feel hopeless, you're alone, there's nobody else there for you. You feel isolated and you feel so alone that you want to remove yourself from the whole equation of life, because why? Well, you can't make an impact. You're so isolated because your identity is so wrapped up and so immersed in yourself. At the very lowest of the tones, at the highest levels, you're merged with the all. So if you imagine that you're in one of those tones, and in the middle is kind of like this neutrality, you're not happy, you're not sad, you're not feeling anything. Above that is, joy, and then from that, happiness, and then understanding is underneath joy, right? So you have neutrality, and then you go up a little more, and then you get understanding, and then you get agreement, and then from there you can get some joy, and then as you go down from neutral, you kind of go down into blame and anger and resentment, and the lower and lower you go, the more depressed and sad you are, down to self-destruction, right? So that's how the tone scale works, and you are on that tone scale all of the time. And it's when you become aware of your tone, of where you're at every moment in time, can you really start noticing where you are on the tone scale. And a lot of this has to do with the handling of bad news, for sure. Whether it's a traffic ticket, to a flat tire, to a broken relationship, to something bad, this is where the tone scale really shows up, because it's when you're pressed and you're crushed and you're squeezed that what's inside of you comes out. So when you're cruising along with no emergencies, even though you're kind of on a lower tone on average, you can stay on a higher tone because there's no stimulus pressuring you. But the moment that there's an invitation to get angry, scared, afraid, one of those, when there's an invitation for one of those, you'll drop down into one of those tones really fast. That's where you have an explosion of a person. That's where they're cruising along and they're happy and they're joyous and they're doing well, and the next thing you know, they're exploding and something has stimulated them. They've gone into a trauma response. They've dropped all the way down the tone scale, and they're handling it through anger, blame, emotion, or rage. So people will drop momentarily down the tone. And that's what David Hawkins teaches in his work, is that there's anger, fear, resentment, blame, all of these categories of emotional tonality of where you are logged at on the frequency scale. And this is frequency work. This is energetic frequency work. Tonality, emotions is energetic frequencies. So when you're vibing at that angry, mad level, well, any stimulus that comes to you is going to do what? Knock you further and further and further down the tone scale, and you're going to spiral, right? And then you have to work your way up through getting into understanding and appreciation. And instead of feeling that there's a victim, that you're a victim, understanding there is no victim, right? You know, that world brings stimulus to make you grow. That right there is the foundation of everything. So if you apply that to everything, if this thing here is your teacher, whatever it is that you're dealing with, then that neutralizes the stimulus of being bad, because you've now called it good. You said, you know what, this traffic ticket sucks, but you know, I knew I should have had the insurance renewed. I knew 30 days ago I should have done something about it, and I didn't. So the guy pulled me over, and now I got a ticket. How do we make it good? Okay, well, I know I can solve this, because if I go get insurance and take it to the court, right? And then you apply application of actions to resolve the situation, but you can't do that from a low place, because it takes resourcefulness to get up out of a situation, and you need willpower to get to your resourcefulness. You need faith and hope and willpower to get to your resourcefulness. So if a stimulus comes like a traffic ticket, right? A traffic ticket comes, there's a stimulus. You can drop down the resentment and blame, you know, you're right. And if you drop down into that place, it's a much longer drive to get up into understanding, appreciation, and gratitude, right? So it takes a lot of work to convert negative to positive when you're low on the scale. If you can get yourself up to some basics of understanding and agreement, and remain there with the neutrality to all things that come into your experience, because you're sitting at a place of appreciation, gratitude, willing to be understanding of something if you can, and agreement. And the foundation of that is that that you hold on to. Your faith quote is that you know the universe is good for you, and you know the universe wants you to grow, and it wants you to take more responsibility, and you're in the effort of being good, and you are a good person, and you're going in the right direction, and you are being led, and you're listening to this talk because you're getting fed. And when you get fed, you get your faith back. When you get your faith back, you get your willpower back. And when you get willpower, you have the willpower to look at something from a higher perspective. And when you can do that, you can get the willpower to take action and start initiating change and insert some control. And then when you insert some control and you start getting some action and you start figuring a situation out and moving through it, then you start feeling the power of your gift, of your anointing, and you start feeling the power of your spirit rise up inside of you. And you have to work your way up through that, right? So that is why the mind assigns meaning. And the meaning that you're assigning to these things is one cue to how you can change your human experience. You know, if you're doing, something and it doesn't work out, somebody backs out of a deal, something happens. You have to apply the interpretation of it as good. What is it telling you? What can you do better at? How can you learn? And therefore, you convert the thing from something that's coming against you, that's an oppression, that's a suppression, that's a loss. You're converting it to something that can add to you. Negative to positive, negative to positive, negative to positive. That is transmutation of darkness to light. And that is what we're teaching here. I hope you like this talk. My name is Joshua Crampton. Visit MultiGenMindset.com if you're interested in books. There's Amazon links. There's life enhancement courses, and there's video courses that you can take that will educate you on universal laws and how to apply these things to your life to become better and better. Thank you.